Fort Knox claims to hold 147.3 million ounces of gold. At May 2026's average gold price of $4,589 an ounce, that pile was worth $676 billion. Yet the federal books value it at just $6.2 billion, using a legal price frozen at $42.22 an ounce. So what's behind the vault door? One of the richest stockpiles on Earth, or America's best guarded story? The government says the gold is there. Auditors say it's there. A Treasury Inspector General says he saw it himself. Yet the public inspection everyone remembers checked only part of the stash. Fort Knox is the name of the massive army post in Kentucky. The gold is kept inside a separate building on that land, the United States Bullion Depository. The building was finished in 1936 with 16,000 cubic feet of granite, 4,200 cubic yards of concrete, 750 tons of reinforcing steel, and 670 tons of structural steel. That's serious security. It's great fuel for suspicion, too. The first gold arrived on January 13, 1937. What's crazy is the shipment came through the U.S. mail. At the time, the Postal Service was the only government agency that could insure it, so America's precious gold crossed the country as mail before disappearing behind the doors of one of the most secure buildings ever constructed. Fort Knox later protected the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Magna Carta, and Hungary's Crown of St. Stephen. At its peak on December 31, 1941, the depository held 649 million ounces of gold, more than 4 times today's claimed total. The story starts with the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Franklin D. Roosevelt's government transferred ownership of America's monetary gold to the Treasury and stopped dollars from being redeemed for gold. Washington had pulled an enormous share of the nation's bullion under federal control. It needed a secure inland home, far from vulnerable coastal cities. Fort Knox became that home. The vault was created during the Great Depression, when trust in banks and money had cracked. Gold meant more than wealth. It meant proof that the dollar rested on something physical. That's why the modern argument gets ugly so fast. People aren't just asking whether the gold sits in Kentucky. They're asking whether the government traded real bars for accounting entries, then hid behind secrecy. And one government visit gave that theory decades of fresh oxygen. By 1974, claims that Fort Knox had been emptied were loud enough to force a response. On September 23rd, journalists and members of Congress entered the vaults. Cameras were allowed in. Officials displayed stacks of gold. The visit was meant to kill the rumor. It didn't. Treasury testimony said the 1974 inspection covered only 21% of the gold at Fort Knox. Notice how this one number changes the story. The visitors saw gold. They didn't personally verify every bar, every compartment, or the full claimed total. That doesn't prove an empty vault, but it does prove that the famous tour was not a complete public count. The government presented the visit as reassurance. Skeptics saw a carefully controlled display. The same photographs could be used to support both views. Claims that Fort Knox has never been audited are false. In 2011, Treasury Inspector General Eric Thorson told Congress that 100% of the Mint's deep storage gold had been inventoried and audited. Annual independent audits had continued since 1993, with no noteworthy exceptions reported. But the system wasn't a yearly recount, with one bar being counted at a time. It worked in stages. From 1975 through 1986, a continuing audit committee checked compartments, tested gold, then closed each compartment under an official joint seal. A broken wax seal or detached cloth tape would show tampering. Later, auditors could inspect an intact seal instead of reopening and recounting the same untouched compartment. By 1986, the committee had audited and sealed 97% of the Mint's government-owned gold. The remaining 3% didn't sit unchecked. From 1986 through 1992, the Mint conducted annual inventories and verifications of the compartments that hadn't yet been placed under an official joint seal. By 2008, every compartment had been inventoried and sealed. In 2010, officials replaced every old seal with new double barrier seals under Treasury OIG observation. Thorson was at Fort Knox and said he personally saw the reserves. The audit evidence is far more convincing than conspiracy videos admit. Yet public access is far more restricted than officials like to acknowledge. In 2017, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin entered Fort Knox with a small delegation, the first outside visit since 1974. His verdict was 4 words: "Glad gold is safe." Catchy, but still not a public audit. Then, in 2025, Donald Trump said Elon Musk would check Fort Knox. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reassured the public the gold was audited every year and all the gold is present and accounted for. Half a century after the 1974 tour, America was having the same argument. Fort Knox holds 147.3 million ounces of gold on paper, worth $676 billion at May 2026's average gold price, yet recorded by law at only $6.2 billion. The 1974 visit showed real gold, but it wasn't a full public verification. Later audits covered the deep storage stock through inventories, samples, assays, and tamper-evident seals. Those audits found no major shortage. So is Fort Knox empty? Probably not. An empty vault theory has to erase decades of inventory records, assays, sealed compartments, outside audit work, and officials who say they physically saw the bars. There's no verified document, witness, or physical evidence showing the gold vanished. The cleanest reading is the boring one. Most, likely all, of the reported gold is still there. Yet Fort Knox creates its own conspiracy problem. On one hand, its security model depends on limited access. On the other hand, public trust demands visible proof. Those two goals collide at the vault door. What would settle the Fort Knox debate for you? A live-streamed inspection, or nothing less than counting every gold bar? Drop your answer in the comments, and tell me which restricted place we should map next. I'm Maps Explained, and this is the world they don't want you to see.